Hi, and welcome to Change Chats, the podcast to navigating your change management career. I am Judith Buffing, and today we are here with Sarah Bar-Lev. We are here today in London. Sarah is a multipreneur, as I call her, very accomplished individual who I always say will come up with 10 more brilliant ideas every time she has some time alone. Today, that's going to be on her way back in the train, and she is a true Gen-Xer. She is the CEO of Women in Change, which is a network of powerful and inspiring women who work in change and drive impact in the world. And she is also a principal change consultant with a leading consultancy firm. She's also writing a book, I Can't Do Us Anymore, turning a recent traumatic divorce into a healing through opening up to the world about her experience. She is the founder of Now Exhale, a one-stop platform designed to support individuals through every stage of separation and divorce. And she always encourages and drives collaboration and champions the voices of marginalized groups. And I just want to say I'm really blessed to know you, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
And I am sure that our listeners will also be by the end of this episode from all the wisdom and tips and tricks they will receive from you.
I hope so.
No, I know for sure. So, for our listeners, you work in change management and transformation, but I also saw that you have a background in law. So, how did you end up in change and transformation?
So, quite by accident, in the sense that my life has had numerous events which have changed my direction. Ever since I was a really small child, I had wanted to be a lawyer. And I used to watch a TV show called Tricelli and another one called The Paper Chase set at Harvard. And I used to watch them going, I'm going to be that one day. That's what I want to do. So if you'd met me between the age of 8 and 18, that's all I wanted to do. So I went to university and read law. And when I was at university, I fell pregnant with my son and had to change gear slightly. And that was because I had a job in London as a lawyer, all lined up, but they were telling me that I would have to work sort of 12, 15 hours a day. It was here in the city in London. And I made a conscious decision that to put my son first.
Right.
And so I went into academic law instead. My subject area was international criminal law, and I taught that and contract and constitutional law at university. And I kind of figured then that was going to be my life. I was writing my PhD at the time and publishing papers, and I looked at a job in Botswana, one in Australia, and I figured I was going to become, a professor one day. And then life threw a curveball in that my son, who was then 5, um, was diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer called desmoplastic round cell tumor of the abdomen. And I carried on doing my job for a couple of months that my employer at Sussex University was really, really good. And eventually they bought me out of my contract because they knew what the situation was. And then I became, for the first time, really a full-time mum, meeting my child at the school gates at the end of the day, which he used to tell me was fabulous. And so I took sort of 18 months out of work because making him a priority was really important, especially because we knew he was terminal from the beginning. And then before he died, I noticed that a lot of the kids on his cancer unit were not going on the trips that I was taking Josh on. So it inspired me to set up a charity called the Joshua Foundation. Joshua was at the very first event, which was a big fun run. His health took a serious decline after that, and he died on December the 4th, 1998, 7.5 years old. And for the next 15 years, I ran the charity. Probably that's when I started to recognize that I was working in an environment that was very much about change. The charity sector was evolving from a sort of the old fashioned sector that it had been to one that needed to adopt new practices, new skills, and new technology. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I then decided that I wanted to try something different and I went into healthcare. So I worked as an operations manager in healthcare and I managed all the change programs there. So I definitely wasn't being called a change practitioner at that point,
Okay.
but I managed all the big transformations in a couple of big healthcare companies in the UK. And then another curveball came along. You'll see that there's a pattern that when these curveballs come along, it changed my direction. I discovered I had breast cancer in February 2018. I was terrified because my son had died of cancer. All I could think about was, is this the end? I was only 50. I made the decision that I was going to get through my treatment without the stress of a job, and I was lucky that I could do that. So I handed in my notice. I spent from the February of 2018 to the November of 2018 basically making sure that all my treatment was good and that I was healthy. Now, this is where I become a change practitioner with the title.
Okay.
I saw a job with the Ministry of Defence. This will make you laugh, but I had decided that I wanted a quieter life. And after having breast cancer, it kind of opened my eyes to the world. And I decided I was going to have a quiet life. So I would just get a job where I could go to work and come back in the evening and have no real pressures, because my career to that date had been mad hours and lots of working and traveling. So I took a job as a change manager with the Ministry of Defence. And I didn't even know what really I was going to be doing in that job to start off with, but it was one of the best moves I ever made. It was right up my street, going in and working with senior leaders and developing projects and doing the change management side of it. I did things like my PROSE qualification at that time, an APMG and all of that. About 6 months into the job, my boss said to me, I think that you should not be working as a change manager, but a senior change manager.
Oh,
So
got promoted.
she had great faith in me. I started to change my mindset away from the quiet life because I started to spot things that weren't being done right, or all that kind of stuff. So I had 6 months. I think I did quite well.
6 months of quiet Sarah Bar-Lev.
Yeah. And so then I got a job then as head of change at Strategic Command, which is part of the Ministry of Defence. And I absolutely loved it because there was no change function there. So I set the change function up, and the organization was made up of sort of 11 separate groups. So I got to work with people and train people on change management right across the board. Then I was lucky enough to go to the Royal College of Defence for a year. And out of that, then I got my job with the consulting firm that I work with. And I've worked on major projects since then. So it's a long answer, but life throws you curveballs. And with me, obviously, it means that I then look at a new direction and see where I go. And I have no regrets about that.
Yeah. And what is it that you like most in a change management career? I guess also when you compare it to your lawyer career.
So what I would say is that all my accumulative experience in the different fields, I think, prepared me really well to go into change management and be able to accelerate quite quickly. And that's not going to be something that everybody can do when they go into change management. I came with a lot of experience of working with senior leaders and projects and transformation. So I was a natural fit into change. I didn't realize that I had for a long time been a change manager in some sense, but I didn't know the tools that you would use as a practitioner at that point. So for me, I learned quickly, and I found that change management really suited me because it's such an agile type of working field. It's no one thing. You are constantly having to adapt to the requirements, and sometimes doing jobs that are clearly not change management at all.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. Yeah.
So you'll end up, I worked for a big automobile emergency sort of rescue company as part of my consulting work. And I ended up doing work that I'm like, this is not change management. This is something project. It's either really project management, or
Yeah,
it might be,
BMO.
might be completely left field of change. Absolutely. And leadership training, which can be part of change management, but this piece of work I did was clearly outside of the normal change management sort of thing. It really was training and development. So I think because it's quite eclectic, that's what suits my personality. Yeah.
Yeah, or doing like technical functional work. I tend to agree with that because that's also for me what keeps it interesting is that there are definitely pillars of change management, but it moves across industries. You always get to meet different people. And yes, because a lot of people don't know exactly what it is, they will throw things at you. And sometimes you're like, don't really want to do this. But then by the end of it, and you've learned something new.
That's one of the great things about change management. And where there are no change sort of setups in organizations, I particularly like, because you can mold your change management to the organization's culture. And that also feeds into my desire to have eclectic work so I can do that. So I think that, we live in a world where change is now the one constant. And Some organizations will do that via their project management teams, but change management is becoming much more vital to people.
I did have another question about you were saying it wasn't necessarily a career that you were aware of, but also back in the day, was it? Or was it when the Pro Size and the ADCAR certifications came up that it really became known career?
Yeah, I think what I've learned is that certainly when I worked at MOD, most of the people who came in as change managers had never had that title in their jobs before.
Yeah.
So they weren't necessarily people who'd come up through the ranks of change management.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I was at MOD, we started to create a career structure so that people could come in at the beginning and then would develop as they went along. So I think that while there are some organizations that are mature enough to have proper change function in place, lots don't still. And
Yeah.
so I think that change management is still in its infancy, really. And it's got a lot of growing to do, a lot of developing to do. And that includes sort of getting organizations to understand why having a change management function is so essential in the days that we live in now.
Yeah, and so going back to your Women in Change network, it's a network that connects women in change. It
Yeah.
also lifts you lift each other up in the network.
Yeah.
There's a lot of inspiration that comes from it. Why did you create that? Was that also because you feel it's still in its infancy and there's not, yeah, a lot within companies that connect women in change, or what was your
So
reasoning
the
behind it?
first reason I set it up is because I'm a completely mad person when it comes to ideas, as you know, Judith.
Yeah.
um, I actually did it originally because working in strategic command as in a change function where we didn't have a change function,
Yeah.
it meant that I didn't work with a lot of change managers there,
Yeah.
and I wanted to widen my own network. So it was done initially so that I could create a sort of group of women that we would all become advisors to each other. But I, first of all, thought that it would be just a small group of people that I would meet up with every now and then online. So that's how it started. So we did our first event in November 22. It was only 4 weeks after my mum died. I did at one point think, can I really do this with everything else and dealing with my mum's death? I went back to some words that my mum said on the day that she died. So my mum was very ill in the final 24 hours and she pretty much was unconscious for the day. But suddenly I was sat with her and I was stroking her hair and she suddenly opened her eyes and said, I've really loved having you as my daughter. It really inspired me to actually think that because of my mum, that actually I shouldn't give up on this dream with Women in Change and that it was really important to do it. So we had our first virtual session in November 22, and I thought about my mum all the way through it. She was a very strong woman and very proud of me, so I thought I need to do this. And it escalated really quickly. Initially, we had people who were largely change practitioners in the real sense of the word,
Yeah.
but we slowly started to attract people who were coaches, worked in HR. And in May 23, we did our first summit, and there were 25 of us there. And most of them were not members of Women in Change, but they were attracted to this idea of gathering together with other female change makers. So we kind of evolved from a change practitioner community to a community of female change makers, and that meant that we were attracting one of our first members is a senior partner in a law firm. So we ended up, and she manages the change projects in her firm, but is not a change practitioner, but wants to learn how to properly manage change in her organization. And we've kind of escalated since then in size and what we offer. And so now I have real global ambitions for Women in Change because I think that there is a need for female change makers to come together, whether it's virtually or via live events. I've witnessed the most remarkable networking since I've been doing this, people connecting up to work together, friendships, even partnerships in business. People who run their own business have joined together to form a bigger business, which then at scale means that they are able to be more effective in the things that they do. And for me, that's one of the best things because I never really see Women in Change as about me. I'm not that kind of leader. I have a certain amount of, I'm very humble in terms of how I do things. I don't make it all about myself. I really believe that it's about the community. And my job is to create things for the community. I tend to keep a relatively low key sort of approach to the leadership of the organization. Not that, I'm well known, obviously, in the organisation as the founder,
Oh,
etc. But
yes. Yeah,
but
for sure.
everybody knows that I'm doing this with a sense of purpose. When I see a room full of people, like we did the other day, all these females that come from different industries, sectors, and job titles, but they're all passionate about coming together and networking and learning, then I can sit there and just. I did on Thursday. I sat down at the front. I didn't have to speak till the end. So I got to listen to all the speakers, and I got to sometimes look around and just think, wow, this is amazing.
This is what you created,
Yeah.
and where it's been or going in like
Yeah.
yeah 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's something that I like because I'm achieving what I set out to do, not just for myself, but for other people. And the original aim that I mentioned earlier about widening my circle, well, now I have over 300 people. So I have achieved my original goal as well. But in doing so, I've turned it into a phenomena that is hopefully, we're now in Canada, we're about to set up in the Netherlands and Australia. We've got Israel lined up as well, possibly. So
Yeah.
yeah, the idea is to have these groups all over the world. And then what's great about that is that people can connect from different countries and cultures and share what will be very different approaches to change management. And some of those countries will be really mature with change management, and some of them will be not. And
Right. Yeah.
it means the women can listen to each other from different parts of the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful. The idea that the Canadian woman working in change can talk to an Australian woman working in change,
Yeah.
that they may never meet in
Right.
person, but they could meet virtually.
Yeah, and also thinking about some of the global projects that I have done, is that you have a change program in mind and then you roll it out to the countries and they're like, no, 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 this is not going to work for me.
Yeah.
It would even be great to talk to women in other countries and, hey, like what would work in your culture or your setting?
Absolutely. And, I think that with global projects, which obviously are a big part of the market as well,
Right.
that you're absolutely right. I had a friend who works as a head of change, and she was rolling out a project across the world and really came unstuck with a particular culture that just, they didn't even know what change management was in terms of, they just got on with projects and did them. But the way that the change program was designed did not suit the culture.
Yeah.
And so she had to learn quick on her feet and do her homework and adapt it. And the secret with change management is you've got to listen to people. You can't make people change if you're going to go in there with an approach that just doesn't work for that organization or that culture.
Right. It's
So
not copy paste.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. You've got to go in and really absorb what the company or the culture is.
Now, if you would have to think about someone who has had a big influence in your career, or maybe a particular event, what was that for you?
I think in the context of change management, it would definitely be my boss at the Ministry of Defence, Julie. She was the one who recognised that after 6 months that I was not just going to be a regular change manager. She recognised my ambition and my passion. She knew my life story, so she knew why things had changed direction.
Yeah.
We really bonded, and she encouraged me to think about, becoming the head of change at Strategic Command, for example, having only really worked in change management in the official sense of the word for a year.
Yeah.
So she was like, you need to go for it because with all your other experience, you can really make a difference. And Julie and I have gone on to be really, really good friends. And when I went through the big trauma last year that I did with my sort of divorce and separation, she is somebody that said, come and stay at my house. And she took me on this huge walk across the countryside where we ended up knee high in mud, totally unprepared for that at all. And she kept apologizing while we were plodding across this field because I just had trainers on. And so they were just completely caked in mud by the end. And we stopped in this cafe and she sat me down and she was like, right, you've always been a really strong woman. You've always had all the answers to everything. Your brain is not letting you do the things that you want to do. So I'm here to help you. And we're going to come up with a plan. And so that has really shown me that she has been there for me and got my back,
Yeah.
and definitely inspired me and continues to inspire me because she's a phenomenal woman. She's been through bereavement with her husband, and she probably is still a single mum. She's got a partner now, but she's still a single mum. And I really am attracted in the business sense to women who are strong, and believe in what they're doing. So yeah, definitely, Julie.
Awesome. Yeah, nice. When you're thinking more about the change practitioners that are just starting out in their career, what is the advice that you would give them?
I'm not going to say don't do it. No. Because today there is a little bit more structure in change management, then there are opportunities for people to go in as sort of more junior change managers. And with Women in Change, we run an awards where we have a Rising Star Award, which is designed for those people that are sort of kicking off in it. And a wonderful girl called Monica won it last year, and she's just, you know, unbelievable kind of energy. Um, my biggest piece of advice for a new or only early career stage change manager, I would say do some qualifications in things that are not just change management. So by all means do ProSci, APMG, all of that sort of stuff, because you need to get that under your belt for career reasons.
Right. It's
People like to see. Yeah.
yeah.
But I'd also say the biggest thing I learned is you really need to understand comms, communications, because sometimes when you're on a project, you are the comms person.
Yeah.
Um,
I noticed so
and
well.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you kind of sit there going, I don't know anything about comms, and
Oh
I don't know
yeah.
about the channels or how to write it. So
To write it. Yeah, that is a capability in itself.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's why there are people who work in comms.
Right.
But you can go into areas where they don't have a comms team,
Yeah.
they don't have a change team, so you become the whole thing. And that happened to me when I went to work for the RAF, and they didn't have a comms team. So from the change point of view, I had to write all the comms and understand all of their sort of delivery models for that. So I'd say get yourself immersed in comms, get a qualification in that area,
Yeah.
so that you can do that. I also would suggest that you look at a qualification in human resources as well,
Okay.
because understanding HR, it helps you understand how the organization treats its people. So I did my level 5 CIPD, and then I did my level 7, which is the master's equivalent, which was a lot of work.
Yeah.
But as a result, I understood the function of HR, because my experience in change management is that I have been part of HR departments for change, which is an odd kind of place because you don't get put in the program and project team. At Strategic Command, I sat in the HR department, and I just think those two areas, comms and HR, are things. The other areas I would say is try to understand, because again, so many pieces of work I've done, they've suddenly said to me, "Oh, you're in charge of all the training as well."
Yeah.
And not necessarily change management training, but all kinds of training. So I'd say be open to the fact that getting qualifications in lots of fields like that, leadership training, development, you can do numerous courses in leadership and management. So you really understand that. Um, and I think, particularly when you work with senior leaders, your credibility will be much better if you can show that you've really got that wide amount of experience.
I think that's great advice and something I want to add here too. Like one of the reasons I started this podcast, I'm talking into a microphone right now. And back in my early days, I would have to make training videos. Beginning, I was like, oh, this is really grinding work. It would be days and days of being
Yeah.
behind the screen, like writing scripts, learning a system that I didn't know. But because of all of that, like even after this podcast is recorded, like the skills that I have to like work with the different programs is what I picked up earlier in my career
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I had to do it. It's not necessarily something that I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to be doing.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
agree with you that like it will never not help you to get a certification in something
No, no.
or dip your toes into something new.
Absolutely. And I think there's a wide variety of things that you can do. For me, predominantly working in change in the defense sector, when I did my master's, I did it in international relations.
Yeah.
And a lot of those subject areas were very relevant to working with the military. So I think you even have to look at which area do you work in. So certainly at the consulting firm that I work at, we are divided into different sectors. So you become a specialist in a particular sector.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that you won't be put on a project in transport or finance.
Right.
But what's great about it is if you really want to, you can stay focused in your area.
Yeah.
And what that means is the additional thing that you need to do is learn your sector, understand the size, the market, figure out who are the main players in it. Because sometimes when you go to a meeting as a change manager, you get put at the back of the room because people think that projects and programs, as a very mature function in many places, they get the seats at the table and the change manager gets stuck in the corner. And I think you've got to show that you've got a voice. So, one of the things that's really important, particularly if you work in a male dominated sector and field, which military certainly is, you have to be willing to put your hand up and speak as a change manager and have your presence known. I know it can be alien, particularly to women, to do that. We don't tend to push ourselves forward quite as much as men do. But I would really say that you need to gain the confidence to put your hand up and contribute as a change manager, because otherwise people will just roll past you, and they just look at you and wonder why you're even in the room. And one of the reasons I think is because there's always this figure bandied around that 97% of transformation projects fail. So some people look at change managers and go, well, why do we need you? Because 97% of everything goes wrong. Now, of course, that's not because of change managers.
It's because of everyone else.
It's because of everyone. And it often is because they didn't have change management in place when they did the projects.
Yeah.
So most of the projects had no sort of intake from change managers. And I also think the other thing you learn in the change field is that you can go into an organization who say they want to do this, and then it's not long before they go, oh, actually, we don't want to do that now.
Right.
We want to change it to something else.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why projects fail,
Yeah.
because they're constantly trying to do new things and they never see something through to its end.
Right.
So, of course, they fail because they stop. And,
Yeah,
so you
they don't have the
that.
attention span
Yeah,
almost to
yeah.
finish it.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important to recognize. And I think you need to be pretty resilient to be a change manager,
Yeah.
because you are going to be going into environments where everybody is going, we don't need this person.
Yeah.
Our
Right.
project and program team can manage all of this.
Yeah.
And when you start talking to them about things like focusing on groups that you need to communicate with, they're like, no, we just send a memo out. We just tell them this is happening. So when you start saying you need to take them on the journey and you need to do this and some sort of live discussions and some of this, it's completely alien.
Yeah, get their feedback,
Yeah,
listen to them, just reach out to them,
Yeah.
see how they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
I think it's really, really important to get your voice heard.
So that's for the younger practitioners. And when we think about other Gen Xers, what would be your advice there? And background to this question, when I run a survey to ask cross generational what women would be interested in hearing in the podcast and also men, it was mainly for Gen Xers where to go from here.
I mean, I think I'd probably answer that in two parts. If you've got Gen Xers who are already working in change management, I think that from an ambition point of view, there are ways and directions that you can go in from those jobs that might take you out of being pure change practitioners, but
Mhm.
certainly, as women in particular, be ambitious to apply for directors of transformation, directors of programs, even if you've specialized in HR sectors, directors of HR. So I would say that they are some natural steps that people could take and take their experience with them. I think with Gen Xers, the interesting thing is that we are now going to retire later than some of the previous generations. My dad retired when he was 60
Yeah.
from his main job. He went on to do other things. But, I think that the retirement age for me is 67. So all the Gen Xers for women in the UK, we've got until we're 67. Of course, you can retire before that if you want to, and you've got a good enough pension pot, etc.
Yeah.
But I actually think you're going to see a lot of Gen Xers, especially women, who will push the envelope as far as when they finish work. I think that they are interested in keeping their minds active. We constantly get told that if you don't do that, there's increased risks of dementia.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important because, of course, not necessarily when my dad retired, but maybe the generation before that, they retired at 55, 60, and they were dead by the time they were 70.
Yeah.
So there was a very short time of retirement. Now, the chances are that if you retire in your mid 60s, you could actually be retired for 20 years of your life. And I think that you will find that if you step away from work completely at that time, that your mind will not be stimulated enough compared to what your career was. Now, some people would disagree and go, I can't wait to get out of my job, and I want to retire. But one of the things I think will be open to people is consultancy on an individual basis.
Yeah.
So if you're a Gen Xer and you maybe don't want to work a full week, then you could look at ways in which you could go into companies and maybe do 3 days a week where there is a less mature change function. Um, because I think the other thing about Gen Xers, especially women, is that they do like variety.
Yeah.
And I think having the opportunity to have some spare time to do some other things. I know so many women of my age who do multi-track of different things. They have a job, they maybe teach on the weekend in a choir or all kinds of things. So I think for Gen Xers, from that perspective, I think that change management is a stepping stone to other things as well, including getting some part-time consultancy sort of work. But I also think the Gen Xers generally are now looking for an elongated career,
Yeah.
and and really want to work for as long as they possibly can. Because my generation, remember, is the generation that started off when equality for women certainly didn't exist. When I went to law school, there were probably about 150 in the first year, and I would say there was no more than 20 women um,
Wow.
who went to law school. Now, the figures now show that there's more women doing law than men. And,
Yeah.
when I was at law school, they tried to push most of the women into family law because they saw that as a female area. Now,
Crazy.
they
Yeah.
also they didn't push men into it, and in fact, men then kind of fought back and were like, family law, I should also be able to do. And there are some fantastic, male family law practitioners. Um, but I think because my generation grew up, my grandfather, when I said I wanted to do law, was like, why are you doing that? You're a woman. And so I grew up in a generation of an enormous amount of negativity about women sort of pushing themselves forward in career wise. And it was difficult at times to
Yeah.
move forward. Things have changed considerably.
Yeah.
You've got more women on boards now than you had 10 years ago, nowhere near the number that you need or should be fair to have, but there is definitely progress being made. And because so many change managers I find are female,
Yeah.
um,
Correct.
and
Yeah.
it definitely is an industry. And I think that there's a reason why a lot of the change makers are female, and that is because we approach work from a different perspective to men. We have more empathy.
Yeah.
Um, we think about people
Yeah.
rather than processes. Um, and so I think, I want to see Gen Xers taking change management jobs where maybe they've never done it before and coming in with this vast experience of life and training as change managers. And, there's no age limit. If you're
No, no.
currently, I mean, I'm 57. If you're currently a 57-year-old woman who's worked in HR all your life, for example, try and apply for a change management job and get stuck into helping organizations to change. There is no limit in age wise to what you can do, but I do think there are advantages of bringing experience with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. Okay. So lots of opportunities. If you think about your career looking backwards now, was there ever a time where you felt really stuck? And maybe particular in change management and you were like, oh, I don't know if I want to continue doing this. Maybe I should do something else.
Yeah, there was one point I worked on a project with an arm of the military, and I found some of the things that I've said already about change managers being kind of pushed into the corner. That my first project I did with the consultancy firm, I was sort of shoulder to shoulder with the senior leaders, advising them on how to manage change and comms, and that played to my strengths.
Yeah.
In my second placement, I felt like I'd suddenly dropped down 3 rungs of the ladder and was really there to produce slides and not to be in meetings with senior leaders. And when I was there, I did start to think, this is not my gig. This is
Right.
not what I want to do. And if I'm not going to be recognized for my skills, but simply sent in to do a slide deck and that kind of thing, which is prevalent in consultancy, obviously, but it's not my skill set. I mean, I can put a deck of slides together, but if you want to use me effectively, then you need to put me with senior leaders and you need to put me in environments where there's immature change functions so that I can go in and create them. So if you don't use my skills properly, and I think this applies to everybody, then you will have people who are not happy about what they're doing. It didn't necessarily put me off working in change management, but it put me off working in that kind of piece of work. And of course, as a consultant, we don't always get choices about what we're doing. But it taught me a lot about what I want to do in the future in change. And that could involve stepping away from consultancy at some point, concentrating on women in change and other projects, which then I become a change maker as opposed to a change practitioner.
Which you already are, I would say, but yeah.
Yeah, but I also think that there's a whole generation of women, and the most important thing for me as well is for people in my age bracket to work with younger women who want to either be change makers or work in change management. And we're doing a next generation summit in January 26, where we're going to bring sixth form girls together with some of our members and really inspire them, because that generation is now thinking about being entrepreneurs more than anything else. If you ask them, they want to run their own business, they want to do their own thing, and they want to be effective and make impact in the world. So I think encouraging them to go into change management is a really good thing.
Yeah.
The jobs in that area are opening up, and I think that it's a role for women. And I don't think it's like when I was at law school where you got pushed into family law because you were a woman. I think we have to say, do you know what? Change management is done well by women. And as a result, we should be encouraged to go into that field. And then the sky's the limit, because when you've done that and you've gained so many skills, like I talked about earlier in comms and HR, you can shift careers.
Yeah.
And that generation is definitely not thinking of staying in one job for the rest of their lives.
Going back just to that example of being in the room and being put in the corner, then how did you get out of that? Did you get up to date with just what was going on then in the world of defense, and that's how you got your voice heard?
Some of that is true,
Yeah.
but really it's about having the confidence to step up. So I remember going into one meeting at the beginning of my career in the Ministry of Defence, and all the men sat around the table, and it was noticeable that all the women were sitting around the side of the room. And that included the entire change management team, which at the point was 3 women. And I asked, why are we all sat here and they're all sat there? And my boss was like, well, that's how it's always been done. So when I went to my next meeting, I got there early and I sort of put stuff out across 3 seats. And then when people were coming, I was like, these 3 seats are for the change management team.
I love it.
So sometimes you've got to be a bit bullish
Yeah.
and basically say, you are going to listen to what we've got to say, and we are going to be at the table
Right.
rather than stuck around the side of the room. So it takes a little bit of ballsy action sometimes. And I think people shouldn't be afraid to do that.
Yeah, I like it. Nice. It's like you're going to collaborate with us and give us respect.
Yeah, I think the respect thing is most important. And I think some organizations do. They are mature enough to recognize that change practitioners make a big difference to how they roll out a transformation or just a project, but others really don't yet get it. For those organizations, people who are doing change management jobs will struggle a lot more. The upside of it is you've got the opportunity to create something that's going to change the future. If you can put a change management structure in place, what you're doing is, it'll be hard work because you'll be pushing against people who may not want you to do that. I certainly experienced that in Strat Command. There were lots of people that didn't like this idea, and I set up a monthly sort of chat where people could join virtually. And I need to be thinking that what you're doing is a really positive thing. So having faith in what you do in change management is really important. I think if you just want a job where you do it and turn up, and then change management isn't right for you. You need to be proactive, and you need to be
Passionate about it.
and you need to be passionate.
Yeah, to move it forward. What do you think is the biggest misconception about our work?
I think that people just think it's some kind of novelty. I think a lot of people think it's a waste of time. It's a practitioner area that they don't really need. I've worked in organizations where they're like, I know how to manage change. I've been doing this for years. And then you throw that 97% of transformation projects have failed, and they're quite open when you meet them. They'll, well, the last project we just didn't fail. So then I do want to say to the person, actually, you obviously don't know how to do change because so many things have gone wrong with previous pieces of work.
Right.
So I think that a lot of people just think change management is also just a whole load of slides
Yeah.
where we go in and we show them a methodology and it's all very strict to that. I certainly know in MOD they had no methodology. So we had to introduce a methodology into the environment. And I think that then what they thought was that we were just about process, not
Yeah.
necessarily about people. We started organizing coffee mornings for the staff to come and listen to an update on the transformation, and started doing the human things that are
Yeah.
part of change.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people think that that's not the right way. It's a bit soft touch. And simply think if you work in a male dominated field, they will just see that as fluffy stuff around the corner. And that's how they see change management.
We are up to our last question here.
Okie dokie.
And I call this one a change smart move. Regardless of any experience, background, country, what would you recommend as a smart move in someone's change career to push them forward?
I think the main thing would be to understand that you can transition from being a change manager to a director of transformation. I think
Yeah.
that's the problem is in change management, there is normally kind of junior posts and then senior change managers and heads of
Yeah.
change in some places. And a lot of people think, well, that's kind of where I need to aspire to. I need to become the head of change.
Right.
But there is a whole raft of jobs above that, including
Right.
directors of transformation or even director of strategy,
Yeah.
where I think people could aspire to do those jobs with their change experience. So
Yeah.
I would say to men and women that are doing change management, don't just see head of change as the end of the line for your career, especially for people who love change so much that they worry about, well, will I still be doing change in
Yeah.
this other career?
Yeah.
So directors of transformation, perfect fit for people. And there's a whole host of other jobs that I think at a senior level are going to be good. I think that if you're a change manager, maybe try and get yourself a NED position, a non-executive director's position with some firms, and be able to sell yourself for that job on the basis that you understand change and you know how to manage people through change, which I think would be a big advantage for NED posts to take it into a company to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that you've got to really look at where do you want to go in terms of career. If you're really ambitious, then the world's your oyster.
Very nice. All right. Thank you so much. Now we're going to do a little bit of a plug for you. So if people want to find you, where
Yeah.
can they find you?
So Women in Change would be the best place. So go to www.womeninchange.co.uk and you will find out a bit more information about me on there. And you can drop me a line on the main email; it'll come through to me eventually. So you'd be, and I'm very open to the fact that on my LinkedIn page, if you want to join up and connect with me on LinkedIn, um,
I can attest. Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I always answer all of the new people that come and connect with me. I love to set up meetings with people who say hi and say what the link is between them and what Women in Change is doing. So I love setting up chats because I am the lover of networking.
Yes.
And I think that, my experience is that I have met some remarkable people through networking,
Yeah.
sometimes purely by accident. I mentioned to you earlier that I went to an event recently and met a woman who we got chatting and we found that we got on really well. She switched the card names on the table to make sure that I could sit next to her. And I was blown away when I found out that she was such a big player in the sort of music industry and arts.
Right.
And we really had a great time. And that's really what um, networking is all about. So if you're interested, if you're a female change maker, not necessarily just a change practitioner, then come join us in Women in Change because we're going on a journey that's really exciting. And what I can promise you is we'll give you lots in return for you being a member.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, that was such a good conversation. I think Sarah Bar-Lev is an inspiration with everything that she has been going through on a personal level, and then came back stronger each time and learned how to pivot into her career. And I think that pivoting, either professional or personally, really helps a change manager because are very often in ambiguous environments. So I think one key takeaway is building that resilience muscle. You might be stepping into environments where there is a lot of tension, resistance, but also not a very clear roadmap. I think another key takeaway is that as a change manager, don't be put in a corner, right? We see things that others do not. We raise things that others do not, and they are so important to be vocalized. Not everyone is always looking at the voices of leadership and below. Not everyone is always picking out what different leaders think and want to say. I think it's important and part of your role as a change manager to vocalize that. And then I think the last reflection is always think through how you can give back to your community as a professional. Doesn't necessarily have to be a change professional, through a podcast, through building a community, or being a mentor to someone, right? Strengthening through each other, reaching out to other professionals. I don't think it matters where you are in your career. It can be at any point. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Please do rate my podcast on Spotify or Apple. That will really help also with the algorithm. And I'm also always very curious for feedback. So do leave me a comment. Do drop me a note on LinkedIn. And I will see you next time.